This isn't Coyote Pass. There are no grand mountain views, no big dreams being mapped out, and no discussion of a forever family settling into a forever home. No, this is where the road runs out. For years, we watched self-proclaimed king Kody Robyn lead his oversized family from state to state, mansion to mansion, in pursuit of a vision. A vision, it turns out, that was no more than a shimmering mirage. What you're looking at, crew, is what our sources are calling the final chapter, the last painful humbling of a king and queen whose entire kingdom has crumbled into dust. This is rock bottom, and this is right here, the story of how Kody and Robyn Brown lost everything. And trust me, we have details you won't hear anywhere else. Whatever happened to that $1 million home? Whatever happened to all the money? And how did they end up living in a trailer at the edge of nowhere, courtesy of somebody else? We've been digging, speaking to people just outside a family circle and piecing together the pieces of a collapse that's been building up, not for months, but years. This is the story TLC isn't telling you. But before we delve into the ups and downs of this fall, if you've been following this saga as long as we have and you're ready for the real truth, go ahead and tap that like button. And if you're new here, or maybe you've been watching without subscribing, hit that subscribe button and ring that bell. We're your go-to for deep dives, behind-the-scenes theories, and updates you won't find anywhere else. You're not going to want to miss a single development in this unfolding drama. All right, let's dive in. To understand how they ended up in that double wide, we need to rewind about 18 months. Christine's departure, then Janelle's, and finally Mary's, didn't just break Kody's heart, it detonated his finances. For years, the family's income was a delicate ecosystem, powered mostly by the TLC paycheck, money that used to be shared among 4 wives. Once 3 of those households walked away, the entire financial load for Kody, Robyn, and their 5 kids landed squarely on their own laps. We all wondered, we all speculated, how were they keeping up with the mortgage on that enormous house, the property taxes, the utilities, Robyn's shopping sprees, and Kody's truck and hobby obsessions? Well, according to the people we spoke with, not even close. But in classic Kody fashion, he came up with a fix. A big, bold, ego-fueled plan that would become the final nail in their financial coffin. Sources close to the Brown family's business dealings, who once worked for them, described to us his last-ditch attempt to remake himself as a financial guru. He is putting what little money they have left into his new venture, what he calls Patriarch Prime Principles. Imagine an online subscription service centered on courses and coaching sessions for men who wanted, again in Kody's words, to reclaim their masculine throne and lead their households with firm, authoritative confidence. It was a little bit self-help, a little bit MLM, and a little bit, well, something else entirely, a personal leadership cult with Kody at the top. He reportedly spent tens of thousands on website developers, professional video shoots, and online ads. In his mind, he was the next Tony Robbins, a powerhouse mentor, a leader of leaders. Says one insider, Mel, he was obsessed. He talked nonstop about revenue streams, scaling the business, building an empire. He really believed thousands of men would pay $90 a month to learn his so-called secrets. And he ignored every single person who advised him it was a terrible idea. It was a problem because nobody bought it. Not a soul. The big launch he'd been bragging about, it wasn't just disappointing. It was a complete disaster. The very group he thought would flock to him, the traditional conservative men, were, according to our marketing breakdown, offended by his public persona from the show. They didn't see a confident leader. They saw a man who had famously lost control of 3 of his own households. The irony? It was loud. Just not to Kody. The market heard it loud and clear. An insider with knowledge of the situation shares that Patriarch Prime has brought in less than $5,000 in the first 6 months, while over $80,000 was invested. While he was lighting their savings on fire for his ego project, the other half of their financial picture was just as troubling. And yes, we are going to have to talk about Robyn. What we are about to report below comes from individuals who were close to the family at the time, but taken together, their accounts paint a remarkably consistent picture, one of deep denial. One source, who wished to remain anonymous, described how packages would arrive nonstop for the Flagstaff house. It felt like she was trying to fill an emotional void with stuff. We're talking designer clothes for the kids, pricey home decor, new gadgets, anything to keep up the image that they were still living the high life. Kody's in his office, stressing over his failing business, while Robyn's just a room away clicking add to cart on money they don't actually have. And based on everything we have gathered, here is what we have pieced together for a theory. Robyn, terrified of slipping back into the poverty she faced before joining the Brown family, retreated into a kind of emotional denial. She had finally gotten the life she wanted, a mostly monogamous marriage dressed up as polygamy, a husband who adored her, and all the comfort she dreamed of. But when the other wives left, that dream started cracking. In her mind, if she kept acting like they were wealthy, then maybe they still were. It was a dangerous psychological game, but with very real dollars. This created the perfect storm. You had Kody's pride, his unwillingness to admit Patriarch Prime was failing, pushing him to sink even more money into it. Then you had Robyn's fear-driven spending, trying desperately to hold on to the fantasy. Together, they were a runaway train of debt. And sure enough, the first sign of that trouble, according to public records we dug up, was a second mortgage taken out on the house. That second mortgage probably covered Kody's initial business investment and helped clean up some growing credit card balances. But it was only a temporary fix, a band-aid on a wound that was never going to heal. Within a year, the payments started slipping. First one, then two, and then more. According to our sources, the bank letters kept coming. The letters sounded a little more serious with each passing one. Kody would then reportedly hide those letters from Robyn, convinced that Patriarch Prime was just one breakthrough away from success. He just needed more time, and of course more money. He even tried borrowing from old friends and from people connected with their former church, but his reputation got there first. No one wanted anything to do with it. Then the final blow came. It was an early spring Tuesday morning, a day that began, an insider says, just like any other. Kody was in his office, supposedly editing another rambling motivational video. Robyn was helping little Ariella with some school project. Then came the knock. It wasn't a neighbor. It was a county sheriff delivering their official foreclosure notice. They had 90 days to leave the home. Just like that, the illusion was shattered. The fantasy evaporated. A neighbor reports to one of our sources that what occurred thereafter was loud enough to hear down the street. Denial turned to screaming. A hysterical Robyn accused Kody of hiding everything from her. An enraged, embarrassed Kody accused, who else? The original three wives. He screamed that they had destroyed him. Their public lambasting took down his brand, and this was all their fault. According to him, he never once accepted responsibility. The 90 days that followed were pockmarked with panic and humiliation. They didn't have money for a rental deposit, their credit was destroyed, and a foreclosure on their record made them pretty much radioactive in the Flagstaff rental market. They were, as one insider put it, financial pariahs. They couldn't even afford movers. This is where the story really takes a sad turn. According to sources, Kody and Robyn had to rely on the few remaining good friends from church and some of Robyn's relatives to help them pack up the house. And that process was rough. One person who was there described it as surreal. There was this huge house full of luxurious items nobody really needed, and Robyn just had a full emotional breakdown over her porcelain doll collection, with her Precious Moments figurines. She went on and on in tears. These are my memories. This is all I have left. Meanwhile, Kody was just out. He would disappear into his truck for hours, sitting and staring at nothing. Then he'd storm back inside, fly into a rage, and start tossing things into boxes, sometimes breaking them in the process. The kids were terrified. They barely left their rooms. And this crew is an important moment to really sit with. Think about the contrast here. When the family moved from Las Vegas to Flagstaff, it was chaotic, but it was a family operation. The older kids pitched in, the wives showed up. Even if they were arguing, they were doing it together. This time, nothing like that. It was just Kody, Robyn, a few reluctant helpers, and 5 terrified children. In an instant, Kody lost the support system he had taken decades to build and then chip away at. Now he felt the hollowness of that decision in the sharpest way possible. With only days to go before the eviction deadline and every rental application denied, they ran out of options. The savings were gone, Kody's business was a financial sinkhole, and Flagstaff, the city they dragged the entire family to, was far too expensive for them to stay. That's when Robyn had to make the call. Sources say that was the most humiliating phone call of her life. She was contacting a distant cousin, Darlene, a woman she hadn't spoken to in nearly a decade. This cousin lived deep in northern Arizona, nearly a 3-hour drive from Flagstaff. Her land was a little patch of nothingness with an old double-wide trailer on it. Her late father had lived there, and it hadn't been touched since. It was run down, neglected, and crucially, empty. The call was tense, according to one person briefed on the conversation. Cousin Darlene was not a Kody fan. She'd watched the show, and like many viewers, she had opinions, strong ones. She agreed to let them rent the trailer, but was firm on her terms. Rental payment is due the first of every month, cash only. No excuses. Month-to-month lease only. And, very clearly, this isn't charity, don't play me. And just like that, the king and his queen were exiled. Not to a palace, anything but a fresh start in a dream home, but to a double-wide trailer owned by a skeptical relative who barely tolerated them. The moving process was its own kind of heartbreak. Kody, driving a rented U-Haul himself, loaded it with what was left of their former life. The expensive leather couches didn't fit. Their grand dining table, once the centerpiece of countless episodes, was sold on Facebook Marketplace for a tiny fraction of what it was worth. Most of their belongings were stuffed into a cheap storage unit, yet another monthly bill they could barely keep up with. They arrived in the middle of the night. The U-Haul's headlights cut through the pitch-black desert to shine on a sagging, tired-looking trailer that was now their home. A witness who described the moment said it was all in the kids' reaction. Silence. Complete silence. Robyn Brown's typically talkative, rambunctious kids had been rendered speechless. Already an anxious person, Ariella looked on the brink of a full panic attack, while Dayton, old, steady, and quiet, stared at the trailer as if his face had frozen there, blank. Little Solomon and Ariella, also too young to understand the weight of what was happening, wouldn't stop asking Mama where their real house was. And Robyn? It wasn't until a full 10 minutes had passed that she stepped out of the truck, our source says, just sitting in her passenger seat, tears streaming down her face, repeating over and over, "This wasn't the deal, Kody. This wasn't the deal." That first week in the trailer was nothing short of a disaster by all accounts. For a family accustomed to living in a 4,400 square foot house, the relative claustrophobia of it might as well have been a pressure cooker. The 5 kids were jammed into 2 itsy-bitsy bedrooms. Kody and Robyn's room was so small that their bed just barely fit. The walls were paper thin. You could hear everything, every cough, every sigh, every argument. The plumbing barely worked, the hot water ran out after one quick shower, and the air conditioner, old, loud, and almost useless. Basically a cruel joke in the Arizona heat. It was a narrow galley with peeling linoleum floors and counters straight out of the 1980s. For Robyn, who adored her big, spotless kitchen and her oversized pantry, this was one of her personal nightmares come to life. Now she found herself cooking on a sputtering old electric stove in a kitchen less than half the size of her former closet. The arguments came fast and came often. These weren't the big, dramatic conversations about family culture we used to see on TV. These were the raw, everyday fights of two people stuck in a situation they created but couldn't escape. They fought about money, they fought about space, they fought about the kids making too much noise. They even fought over whose turn it was to jiggle the handle on the toilet that wouldn't stop running. Kody, Sans' large house, his authority and image, became a shadow of himself. He said he sat for hours on those rusty metal steps outside staring at the dirt. His kingdom had shrunk to a 1,200 square foot tin box on a dusty patch of land. He was no longer the patriarch of a large family. He was just some poor middle-aged man who lived in a trailer. With cousin Darlene clamoring for rent, the food supply dwindling, and no light at the end of the tunnel, Robyn phoned. She phoned Mary. The source who told us about this said Robyn was not the woman we saw on TV. Not poised, not dramatic. She was completely shattered, crying, apologizing, pleading. And then she asked for money. She said, alone, just enough to get us back on our feet. How did Mary react? After years of being pushed aside, forgotten, minimized, and undermined by this very woman now begging her for help, Mary remained calm. She was polite, she was steady, and she was clear. She told her, Robyn, I wish you and the kids the best. I will pray for you. My financial life is mine now. There is nothing I can do for you. Then she just hung up. That was the final break, the moment the last bridge collapsed. And Robyn, once the favored wife, the chosen one, the woman who won, now stood utterly and completely alone with the very man she'd fought so hard to keep, an angry, bitter, and broken man in a double-wide trailer, left with no friends. And it was as she sat, holding the silent phone, that reality finally arrived. In came rushing the weight of the choices between the alliances she made, the lives she stepped upon to get there. The king had fallen. The queen was living like a pauper. Their story was about to move into its darkest chapter yet. Welcome back. In part 1, we walked through the financial collapse of Kody and Robyn Brown, a downward spiral fueled by failed ventures, reckless spending, and the harsh reality of a family no longer united. The last time we left them, they were seemingly at absolute rock bottom, isolated, humiliated, and living in a deteriorating double-wide rental while the original 3 wives are thriving. But as it turns out, what we saw then wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. What follows, culled from our evolving theories and a mosaic of stories from individuals orbiting the situation, is darker, more intimate, and far more devastating. This is how it all fell apart. The slow undermining of pride, the daily hardships that wore him down, and the final disintegration of a man who once thought of himself as untouchable. To truly comprehend the depths of this collapse, one has to look beyond the headlines into the daily details, for therein lie many uncomfortable truths. Imagine the sensual texture of their new life. The trailer wasn't just small, it was an assault on the senses, a faint but perpetual odor of decaying pipes and desert dust, a low, humming whine of an overworked window AC unit that fought to stir the heavy Arizona heat, floors that were spongy and unreliable underfoot. Every morning, this is what faced Robyn, a woman those who knew her characterized as exacting, restrained, and uncommonly invested in her surroundings. The lady who is slowly coming undone is the subject of our sources. Her master suite, once her sanctuary, was gone. In its place, a bedroom barely large enough for a bed. Her office, the space from which she once promoted my sister-wife's closet, was reduced to a single corner in the living room, a flimsy card table stacked with unsold jewelry, past due notices, and unopened envelopes. No privacy, no space, no escape. Meanwhile, her children, kids used to space, quiet, and routine, were suddenly living on top of one another. Their restlessness filled the trailer like static electricity. In that confined space, even simple noise felt amplified. And the children are unfortunately bearing the heaviest emotional cost. Eyewitness accounts from the family and those in close proximity of the family paint a very different picture. Dayton, who is an adult now, was first to make a run for it. Our informant says that after one explosive argument between Kody and Robyn, he silently packed a bag and was gone. He moved in temporarily with some friends from college, unable to take the tension anymore. Aurora and Brianna, both deep feelers by nature, started folding in. The neighbors around cousin Darlene say they would sit outside for hours upon hours, mostly just staring, rarely talking. None of that spark we ever saw on screen showed up. They were drained looking, weighted, adrift. These kids weren't the bright, cheerful youngsters America knew as they grew up. These were teens absorbing an emotional spill of decisions they never made. And then there were the youngest two, Solomon and Ariella. They absorbed every ounce of tension radiating through that cramped trailer. Children may not understand financial collapse, but they instinctively feel fear, anger, and instability. The weather in that home wasn't just stormy, it was full-on hurricane force. The fights between Kody and Robyn were relentless. According to numerous accounts, the shouting was so loud and so frequent that cousin Darlene, living nearly a quarter-mile away, would get complaints from her other tenants. The fights were never about big issues. They were about everything and nothing. They fought about a $50 grocery shop. Kody blamed Robyn for indulging in brand-name cereal. Robyn would have a meltdown, saying that it's because she wanted to give her kids a small taste of what it would be like to have a normal life. They fought about truck fuel. They fought about a $10 copay. Because when you have no savings, no income, and no hope on the horizon, every expenditure, and I mean every single dollar, is a battle, Lynn would explain. And at the center of all that chaos had stood Kody, the leader, the man of action. Yet so much of that man, our sources would have me believe, had become no more than a shadow, a man driven by an inability to cope with failure. A lion locked in a cage with no kingdom to defend, but only pacing and seething, as I have seen it put. His days were a melancholy, predictable sequence. Mornings began with him slumped at an ancient laptop on the rickety kitchen table, struggling mightily to resurrect Patriarch Prime. His efforts at making videos were thwarted at every turn. There was no light, bad acoustics, and he filmed as he would have on a trailer kitchen. But most damaging, he began to share more and more of himself on camera. The smooth stage presence gone, replaced by an angry, bitter man ranting at a webcam. Fans deserted him as he increasingly went irrational. But then came the job search. But what realistically was he qualified to do? According to a source who allegedly viewed his resume, it contained almost laughable information. A brief mention of ad sales from 20 years previous, various titles he'd given himself, including but not limited to family manager and media personality. The harsh fact he could not reckon with, he was a man well into his 50s with no actual job for the past 10 years, aside from appearing on television as himself. Nevertheless, he tried. He went on interviews for sales positions, and he was spotted and, allegedly, chuckled out of an interview. He tried to get into selling guns based on his gun show bluster, but he was not about to be given the trust necessary within the tight-knit community of gun sellers. And perhaps the most astounding rumor we uncovered would be that he even applied for a shift manager position at a big box home improvement center and got turned down because he didn't have the proper resume. It was humiliation upon humiliation, and it just seemed to get worse and worse. Kody's humiliation was complete. His last shred of hope rested with TLC. But as whispers within the industry have hinted at, he worked that hard more than anything. He allegedly bombarded the network with calls and emails with concepts for shows that all had something in common, a return. Kody's Patriarch Prime, Kody Brown starting over. He had visions of himself as a fallen king, rising from the ashes with determination and hard work, rebuilding an empire. But the network isn't buying it. The magic of sister wives has always been about the relationship between these women. Without them, Kody isn't interesting, he's destructive. Fans have clearly been rooting for Christine, Janelle, and Mary. The couple and Robyn aren't the underdogs who were misunderstood, they're villains within their own drama. Networks don't reward villains with an epiphany if there hasn't been an apology, an epiphany, or a reckoning. The response from TLC came clearly. No. No solo show, no comeback series, all without a heroic tale. That rejection, sources indicate, pushed Kody into an increasingly downward spiral. Now he rarely emerged from the dark, cramped trailer bedroom, pulling shades close as he only rarely left it. Certainly no man who once pranced from multiple homes proclaiming himself patriarch had ever so greatly fallen. But at the same time, the empire that was exploding was that of... But as Kody pouted in a dark room and Robyn conserved toilet paper, the first three wives were working on something historic. Their progress seemed almost hard to follow. There was a new triumph every week. It was a testament to what they were capable of doing once they were freed from Kody's failing leadership. Their book, Unmarried, Surviving a Patriarch, not only reached the bestseller list but became a phenomenon. It became an essential read for every book club. It flooded every talk show. Women all around the nation related to it with all its emotions, be it survival, resilience, or rebirth. Their audiobook, acted and narrated by these very women, won several awards. The paperback deal came at an unbelievable price. A film deal caused commotion at Hollywood. But the OG3 weren't done. They launched a podcast, and again they chose the same title, Sisterhood Rising, and it became an overnight sensation, reaching the #1 spot on the charts. Specifically, they addressed subjects such as recovery and money, getting out of bad relationships, rebuilding fresh after midlife, co-parenting, and finding meaning. Their on-air dynamic was unforgettable. They were endearing, insightful, informative, and hilarious, and the monetary returns were astonishing. Mary slipped seamlessly into her role of COO, using the business acumen she had developed at LuLaRoe and with her bed and breakfast. She took charge of contracts, money, and planning. A pillars of the community wife no more, she was an accomplished businesswoman. Lizzie's Heritage Inn was flourishing, and Lizzie was using her earnings to fund Sisterhood Rising Media. She had her life under control. She mattered. She was happy. Christine became the essence and smiling face of the brand. She was a natural favorite with the media. The online food show, Cooking with Christine, hit it big and brought her prominent food sponsorships. Having her family and grandchildren around her in beautiful Utah, with a stunning home that she alone had bought for herself, she looked radiant and extremely happy. She had made the choice and achieved success. And then there was Janelle, the architect, the visionary. The breaking ground for Coyote Pass Empowerment Retreat marked a historic event. Almost all of the next generation were there. kids, grandkids, and friends. It was more than an addition and remodeling project. It marked the start of a matriarchal lineage. Janelle was absolutely at home, hard hat on and blueprints clutched, networking with contractors and planning. No waiting on a man, no sacrificing. She made something tangible, something lasting. The retreat center, based on preliminary design shared with us, is amazing. There are cozy guest cabins, a central lodge with a full kitchen, yoga, meditation rooms, and hiking trails incorporated throughout. She brought on partnerships with licensed therapists and wellness vendors. It wasn't a dream, it was an ultra-funded and astonishingly designed business, a future, a legacy, a rebirth. The land that Kody had so lovingly neglected for so many years was now under Janelle's control and on its way to being a haven of restoration and success. But the ever-present success of the OG3 haunted Kody and Robyn. It tormented them every time they turned on a TV and saw them on an evening news program. It hurt them with every Instagram picture they posted. But whether it was deliberate or not, it seemed as if the OG3 just twisted the knife a bit with every passing victory. One of the most hard-hitting moments, we're told, came as they promoted their book on a morning TV show. The interviewer put a very simple question. Reflecting on those experiences, what would be the biggest financial blunder that family made? Without hesitation, Janelle, ever the numbers guru, honestly, it was a move to Flagstaff. We were doing well financially in Las Vegas. We had 4 beautiful properties that were appreciating in value. It was an eco-driven move, an emotional move, and it made no sense on any level. It levered us to the max, and it caused the destruction of the financial structure of our family. We never recovered from it. Kody and Robyn are watching from the trailer. According to our source, Kody looked as if he had just been punched square in the stomach. It had all been his plan, his stroke of genius, the promise of utopia, Coyote Pass. To have Janelle so completely and succinctly blow it all apart before his eyes robbed him of every facet of his being as patriarch and visionary. The trailer burst into chaos. Kody allegedly threw a coffee cup against the wall, breaking it. As he screamed and yelled, he shouted, "She's lying. They're all lying. They're revisioning history and making me out to be the bad guy." Robyn tried very hard to calm him down, but he stormed past her and took off in his truck. He literally disappeared into the desert for hours, leaving the trailer and his family in turmoil. And as the storm swirled within, a new and very live danger lurked without. Cousin Darlene had reached the end.